Hey, what's going on? It's Dr. Mike T. Nelson here, back on the Flex Diet podcast, where we talk about all things to improve body composition by adding more muscle strength and performance, and doing all of it without destroying your health within a flexible framework. Today on the podcast, we've got Dr. Mike Malloy. And we talk all about the needs and the amounts of carbohydrates primarily for high-level athletes, particularly CrossFit athletes here. So Dr. Mike, who's a great name, coaches a lot of high-level games competitor CrossFit athletes. And so I wanted to bring him on to discuss why carbohydrates are beneficial, the pros and maybe possibly some of the cons of a higher carbohydrate diet. And what I really loved about this episode is that he has permission to use specific names in case studies, which is awesome. So you can look up these athletes. The nice part about CrossFit is you can see their performance level, you can see videos of them, you can see exactly all the work and everything that is being done. Now, granted, these are elite high-level competitors, but the point here was just to illustrate the extreme end of the spectrum, because I believe the extremes inform the means. This doesn't mean that if you are not doing 2 to 3 sessions a day sometimes, that you can get away eating 700 grams of carbohydrates perhaps. But the point is, most people I consult with would do better eating more carbohydrates, especially if performance is their goal, and a lot of times even body composition. If you look at the body composition of high-level games competitors, it's normally extremely good. So I like these kind of extreme conversations because they do help illustrate some points, and they give you a reference point that you can scale back from to reach what works for you or for your particular clients. And this interview was so great, it's actually added to the Flex Diet certification under the carbohydrate section. But I wanted to highlight it here and make this one public so people have more information, because I think carbohydrates are still viewed as negatives and just the macronutrient that makes you fat, and there's no performance benefits to it, which obviously is not true at all. Although I do think that is changing and starting to get better, which is great. And then also our other sponsor here is Element. Go to drinkelementT.com/Mike Nelson, and you'll be able to get a free little cool sampler pack with that. And this is by far and away my favorite electrolyte drink. I'm down here kiteboarding and working in South Padre, Texas. So I've been using a lot more Element than normal to keep myself hydrated, because especially being out on the water kiteboarding, it's deceptive how much fluid and electrolytes you actually lose, because it can feel warm, but you don't have the perception of sweating as you do because you're out playing in the water. And I tend to try new stuff and crash, so I don't realize how much fluid and electrolyte I'm actually losing. Plus, it's getting warmer in many different areas. Even back in Minnesota, it got up to 79 degrees the other day, I heard. So now is the perfect time to increase your amount of fluids and electrolytes. I find Element to be a super easy and actually very tasty way to do that. So go to drinkelementT.com/Mike Nelson. I'll have a link to that below. You'll be able to get all that information. If you're interested in joining the waitlist for the Flex Diet certification, we will put a link to that below here also. The next time it will open will be in June. So if you are looking for a complete system for nutrition and recovery, we do talk a little bit about some basic movement, exercise, and NEAT. And you want to learn the details, such as we go into in this podcast, and you want to learn the concepts of metabolic flexibility and flexible dieting. And then you also want to learn the 5 explicit action items within a complete system of what to actually do. So you learn the big picture, you learn the specifics, and you learn the exact protocol to do for yourself and clients for better performance and body composition without destroying your health. Many times you actually become more healthy in the process. So we'll have the link there below to hop on the wait list. Next time it opens will be this coming June, and then probably not the rest of the year is what we're scheduled right now. So go there and hop on that and enjoy this conversation with Dr. Mike Molloy all about carbohydrates. Hey, what's going on, Doc? How are you?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And it was great to finally meet you in person at the NEC
Yeah.
conference this past fall. That was super fun.
Yeah, for sure. Same. I've been following your work ever since I saw you were coming to Jason's conference, and yeah, big fan of yours as well. So really excited to be on.
Yeah, thank you. And your talk there was great, which
Thank you.
kind of inspired me to do this one, which the general concept is just metabolism and even carbohydrates. Because
Yeah.
I think the thing that is probably shocking to most people is how many grams of carbohydrates like high level CrossFit athletes eat and even other athletes. But I
Yeah.
think CrossFit being one, you can see the physiques of the people performing. You can see their performance, like you're literally watching their performance,
Yep.
and it being more popular. I think people would be surprised at one, how much it does vary. Like you
Yes.
can't just give a set number. And then two, just the amount of food, because again, the average person would think, oh my God, if I ate that much, or if anyone
Yeah.
ate that much,
Right.
they wouldn't look like that.
Exactly. Completely. Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's obvious. It's often very shocking to people, even athletes within the sport that are training with that methodology and struggling to hear about what some other people are doing. And then, like you said yourself, the variety of responses, the variety of sort of things that we have to take into consideration as performance-based coaches to get to that individualized prescription for each athlete because like you said there's formulas out there that everyone starts with, but at the end of the day they never really capture all the aspects that go into an individual's little world.
Yeah, what would what was the range in your experience? And if you can name names, great. If you can't,
Yeah.
totally understand. Not trying to throw you under the bus or anything.
Oh
But
no, for sure, I can talk about it.
um,
All my athletes are happy to share.
yeah, what are some of the ranges you've seen just in terms of
Right.
the lowest kind of amount of carbohydrates to like the highest, if we just leave it at the carbohydrate amount?
Yeah, for sure. So again, there's some variability based upon how different athletes train. So if a good athlete has a good coach and they're a really powerful athlete, someone who can put out a ton of power, they may not train as much volume as somebody who's much more endurance based, and they're going to have a higher volume of output as something like Jason Leiden would talk about. Nevertheless, for the smallest athletes that are power based, still something in like that 380, 400 grams of carbs range. And then on the high side for these, for lack of a better term, bisons of athletes that are just powerful and can go for a long time. This is just females I'm talking about to start with.
Yeah.
I would say 550, 650, 700 as we really approach games level training and volume. That would probably be the highest. The highest numbers I've ever given out would be either Emma Lawson, so second fittest woman in the world. She was at about 4,200 total calories per day, extremely carb bias, like 55%, 60% carbohydrates. Or Sydney Michalician, another Canadian athlete. I don't know what about it is about Canadian metabolisms, but she was in like leading up to last year's semifinals, eating close to 4,500 calories a day. And she's a little bit of a bigger athlete than Emma. So that'd be the female side. The
And do you
males,
know how
go
much
ahead.
like grams of carbohydrates that would be if
How many
you approximately?
grams? Yeah. So Sydney was doing like 680, I think,
Yeah.
at one point. Emma was like low sixes. Like Emma is like a little eating machine, but she likes to stick with her foods. And so we put a little bit more emphasis into protein and fat than carbs. Not that again, she's still eating just absolute shitloads of carbohydrate,
Right.
but like she wanted to have more balanced meals in there. So like her protein intake was way above what is required from a
Mm.
metabolic capacity. So she was eating like 200 grams of protein and 140 grams of fat, and then 600 plus grams of carbohydrates. But like, yeah, so it's just all relative. It's just personal preference. Again, there's all the biases that are out there in the scientific reports, but at the end of the day, you got to figure out what's worked for each athlete. And yeah, just huge quantities. On the male side, there's just as much variability. The most extreme examples of the differences that I see would be two absolutely shredded, like some of the most shredded dudes in the sport of CrossFit with very different like caloric requirements. The first being on the low side, Ironically, Noah Olson.
Hmm.
So yeah, Noah is like what, probably like the first or most aesthetic dude in the sport. Like
Oh,
just
he's a
muscle on
big jack
muscle.
looking dude.
Yeah, right. Like
Everyone's
the
like,
only
whoa, I
person
want to look
he's
like that
jealous of, I
dude.
think, is Chandler Smith, right? But anyways,
Yeah.
yeah. And sure, he's still eating 10 grams of protein, 120 grams of fat, but he only like really for his volume of training, maybe like 500, 550 grams of carbs. And if we do more than that, and Noah's pretty damn good about his tracking when we're in season, he would add consistent weight, right? He would start to get up to that 200, 202 range. And so I was like, okay, listen, you just have a really efficient body and metabolism. And then on the flip side, the Panchek twins, so
Hmm.
Saxon and Spencer, both of those guys, they need 8,000 calories a day. No joke. Two different twins, obviously. One training with Proven and the other one with Nick, another great coach. And they both needed just insane amounts of food. And again, like they're 190 pounds soaking wet. Just to allow them to eat more food, we would have their protein in like the mid 200s, fat like 170 grams, like way more than I would normally use with almost anybody. But then they're
Hmm.
eating 800 plus grams of carbohydrates, right? And it's just a mixture of carbohydrate powders, bagels, oatmeal, applesauce, like dried for anything and everything we could use to get it down. Like the only time we touched vegetables with those guys was on rest days because they were just a waste of stomach space on the other days of the week. You know what I mean? Not anti-vegetable. It's just like they ate broccoli. They'd be like, I'm too full to get my calories in. And I'd be like, okay, great. And then a week would go by and they'd be like, I've lost 4 pounds. And I'd be like, Jesus, right? So it's interesting. So yeah, so two really dichotomous like answers from three super high level men in the sport. And if somebody had asked me how many calories Noah needs, I would have guessed like huge numbers,
Oh,
huge.
yeah.
And it didn't pan out that way. And every once in a while he'll drop his macros online. I'm like, no. I'm like, absolutely not. You are not doing me any favors out here.
But he, his numbers are almost what people want to see.
Right.
And some people are even shocked at that. And like
Yeah.
like you said, that's the low end.
Right. That's the low end. Yeah. 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 For sure. For sure. Yeah. So
So,
it's really interesting how the body works, whether he's just got a really great GI system that generates a really low thermic effect of food or something like that, or when he's so low stress about everything, like when
mhm.
he's done training, does all of that just go back to like baseline and everybody else's bodies are just crushing? I don't know the answer to it, but it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the twins, and this is just my guess from the outside looking in, I would call them the quote unquote the twitchy athletes,
Yep.
where like they appear to be like in constant motion, like
Yep.
all the time. Like you've seen these
Truth.
athletes where like when they're tapping their toe, they're doing something like you tell them to sit still and meditate and do a Zen style thing to meditate, watch a tree for 5 minutes, they're gonna kill you.
Right. Right.
Where other athletes appear to have much more of an on and off switch and they
Totally.
don't seem to
100%.
require as many calories. I don't know what
Yes,
your
I
thoughts
agree with
are on
that
that.
completely. I agree with that completely. Another really good example of that on the female side, who I told a story about before, is Christy Aramo or Christy O'Connell. So she's 130, 135 pounds soaking wet. And she came to me massively under eating, very sort of old school CrossFit indoctrinated about certain carbohydrates being bad for you and things of that nature. Or like feeling as though she had to get huge amounts of micronutrient dense foods in at every meal. And we worked her up from probably like low 2,000 calories to somewhere in the low 3,000 to 3,500 range. And she shredded out, added a couple of pounds of lean muscle, but just went from having a very good physique to like one of those like, holy moly, like that woman is insanely fit type things. And what I've realized was Christy has an advanced training age. She's been training since she was like born, essentially. She didn't really require or do a lot of volume, but she was getting on the order of 25 to 30,000 steps per day as a coach
Woo!
at her facility, right? And
Oh,
so
wow.
for her, I think when she was calculating, doing her own nutrition work or working with other less wonderful companies that have a desire to drive eating disorders, from what I can tell, um, that she was only taking into account her exercise, right?
Mm,
And for a 130-pound female training 3 hours a day, like you get to like numbers that feel like more normal for people. But if you don't take into account what she's doing outside of her training hours, you're massively underrepresenting what she needs from a food volume perspective.
yeah, and that's I've had similar stuff. I've told this on before that even with like physique competitors where like how
Yep.
much muscle mass they have. I remember like a natural physique competitor I worked with. She had a lot of muscle, but she was just a smaller female. I think her stage weight was under 130.
Yep.
She was still at like 250 grams of
Yeah,
carbohydrates the week of her
absolutely.
show, like off
Yeah.
season, easily 300-400. And
Yep.
I'd have dudes doing the same thing, physique competition, natural guys, literally one guy twice her size. And his carbohydrates were less than her.
Yeah,
You
I
know, and
believe
I'm looking at this and I'm
it.
like, going, this defies all logic because
Right.
you would think with that much more muscle mass and everything else. But like you said, you have to take into account
Yes.
their baseline, maybe the old thrifty versus non-thrifty
Yep.
metabolism, how much movement they do, and all these other factors that really do make a huge difference.
It's a huge difference, right? And all, even for physique, where I think a lot of it is much more controlled, have a really good sense of how much a person's burning from their training.
Right.
And then you have a great, something like Alan Aragon's TDE equation or something along those lines, where they start to take into account your movement outside of the gym, but how aware is a person of their fidgety nature? Like I wasn't aware of mine until I was doing a podcast with some people and I watched it back and I was like, I'm the only one that won't sit still in this camera. Everyone else is like, boom. And I'm like here, there. I can't stop moving my feet. And yeah, you're like, you're not aware of it. It's subconscious for a reason.
So how do you use then, do you use equations to try to predict calories with people? What is your, if you don't mind
Yeah.
sharing some of your
No, of course. Yeah.
process with that? Because what I've noticed, and if I could give an equation that would be right, let's say 99% of the time for carbohydrates,
Sure.
I'd probably be kiteboarding off some private island somewhere else,
You're
right?
absolutely right.
I get, and
Yeah.
I've tried, like I have tried for God, 15 plus years now, and
Yeah.
sometimes you'll hit it, but more often than not, I'm
Yeah.
just
Adjusting.
wrong.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. So, of course, the first thing is calculate total caloric needs, right? So, to do that, I'll usually take their body weight, which is generally in the right range for where they want to be within the sport, although dysmorphia and societal expectations can sometimes drive that number in the wrong direction. And then I'll just use a multiple, like a basic multiplier system, not so different from Alan Aragon's TDE equation. And so, on the low side of a CrossFit athlete, maybe 2 hours a day with low to moderate levels of NEAT outside of training, I'll give them like a 16 or a 17 multiplier. For 3 hours, we're looking at 18, 19, 4 hours, 20, 21. And then as we start to go up, we'll go from there. And I'll use that as a baseline. If I have no other information, hey, you come to me, you've never tracked before in your entire life, we have no caloric information, I'll use that as a baseline. I know a lot of people will go out there, oh, just have your people track food for 2 weeks or so. And there's nothing wrong with that approach, but I feel as though the simple act of starting to track changes behavior pretty
Oh,
dramatically
totally.
of
Yeah.
itself. Yeah, I'm not surprised you agree there. And so it's a combination of both of those things. And then from there, though, it's yeah, I'm chatting with my athletes 2, 3 times a week to get a sense of how do these numbers feel? Are you hungry? When are you hungry? Are you never hungry? Are you hungry on your rest days, right? Those things are really going to be important for me to generate total calories. And then from there, I like anywhere from zero point 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per pound of desired body weight as I subtract those calories from the total. I like the fat at a bare minimum to be the same number. So let's say we have, I don't know, a 150-pound female, it's bare minimum 600 calories of protein. I'd like to have at least 600 calories coming from fat, although I will often go higher. Subtract those out, and then the rest essentially are carbohydrates. So usually for the higher volume athletes training 4+ hours a day, it's at least 50, if not 55% of their calories are coming from carbohydrates.
Yeah. And that over the years, that's where I've ended up too. Like I'll use 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of
Yep.
body weight. Fat, I tend to leave relatively fixed. I'll start lower-ish, 60, 85 grams per day, somewhere in there. Again, some people definitely go higher, fill in the rest with
Yep.
carbohydrates, and for most
Yeah.
people, you're relatively close. The hard part is, like we mentioned, what that amount of carbohydrates is
Yes.
extremely variable.
Yeah, it really does. Like you're saying, the protein and fat kind of similar-ish ranges, sometimes more fat, sometimes less, depending on how much volume. But that variability around the carbs is just something you got to play with and get a sense of with your athlete what they're going to respond to. The fun part is like when you get somebody and they feel like they're eating more, whether they are or aren't, but their performance is going up, they're leaning out, and all of those things are happening at the same time. That's like the where people are like, "Oh my God, you're a magician," and I'm like, "No, we're just actually eating in a way that supports your health, building muscle mass, supports full-blown thyroid function and everything else. And now all these systems are coming back online. And yeah, you may be eating more, but you're also burning more as well. So guess what? You're going to keep eating even more than we just gave. That's the goal for me. And that's the fun part of the job.
Yeah, I remember asking that to John Berardi years ago. I had this skinny high school kid that looked like an eel-shaped rake who just couldn't gain weight. And I kept I'm like, I don't know, man. And I just started giving him more and more calories. And
Yep.
I remember asking John, I said, hey, man, what do I do with this kid? And he's at some point he will out eat his metabolism. I was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, good point. He's like, it's not going to increase linearly forever. I was like, oh,
No, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I've run into a couple of those high school boys myself where it's just, are you sure that you're not doing more training? They're
right.
like, nope. And I'm like, do we need to attach like a pedometer to your wrist to see what's going on? You're like, what is happening? Like, why are you burning so many calories? But eventually you do finally get past that adaptive response to eating more food, that increase in need that can exceed 1,000 calories in some people, if not more in others. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the Levine study. I know you talked about that, which is literally one of my most, if I ever had to pick a favorite study, that's probably like top five.
It's so cool.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Just
Sure.
discussing what happens when
Yeah.
you overfeed people calories. I talk about this in the Flex Diet Cert too, is because people, if you get them to buy into calories in, calories out, which
Yep.
works,
Yes.
they just assume that if you just take in more calories, that you just get fat.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. There's, I think that people miss that there's like a very fluid interreaction or inter action, excuse me, between calories in and calories out that most people don't recognize. And it goes in both directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you increase calories in a demographic of people, they're going to increase calories out subconsciously. As a good example, I recognize in myself that if I sit down and eat 3 donuts, I will naturally start to bounce my leg without even paying any attention to it. And I'll do that for hours and like hours afterwards. And unfortunately, not everybody does this, but it seems to be a mechanism that prevents weight gain in some individuals, somewhere in that like what 40% or population or so, maybe a bit less. On the flip side, if you restrict calories, people obviously assume, well, I'm just going to lose weight forever. And it's, well, no, there's a compensatory mechanism in that direction as well, which is your body doesn't like this. And it's got a couple of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years of evolution baked in there, designed to prevent you from starving to death. And so one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to have a crazy desire or drive to go eat, or you're going to move less. Both of those things will ultimately move you out of that calorie deficit that you're trying so hard to generate in the first place. And then the last situation is some people will say, well, okay, well, I'll just go exercise the hell out of myself, and this will solve the problem. And it's not a perfect model, and there's definitely some evidence against it, but at least to an extent of maybe several hundred calories. If I go walk 15 miles today or run 15 miles, I will probably plant my ass on the couch and not move for the next 8 hours unless I absolutely have to. And so this massive deficit that I thought I created is going to get smaller than I think it is. And yes, you can absolutely overcome that. There's some studies that have been done that have shown that quite nicely that, yeah, you'll easily adapt against maybe, I don't know, we'll say an hour's worth of exercise in a caloric deficit. But if you go and do 2 or more hours, like there's a limit to how much your body can adapt, and eventually you will surpass that. So it's just it's not simple arithmetic. It's really more of this calculus, for lack of a better term, that ultimately determines energy balance.
Yeah. I think the hard part about that too is that we're just with technology, I think we've gotten a lot better at measuring calories in and logging everything and assuming people are accurate, all that stuff. But on the calories outside of the equation, for known activities, they're pretty damn good. If you're running, it's got a GPS and heart rate, like it's pretty good. Or you're biking, it's pretty
Yep.
good. But CrossFit, who
Oh my
knows?
God.
Like most of your other stuff, like most of the activities you're probably doing,
Yes.
it it's gotten a lot better, but I would say it's still, at least in my experience, the wearables are far enough off the total
Yeah.
daily energy expenditure that unless I'm putting a fudge factor on it where I can adjust it,
Yeah.
it does appear to be relatively consistent, but the
Yeah.
sheer number I find just is not super accurate.
No, I think if most people were to go off of what their wearables say they should eat, they gain a substantial amount of weight if they
Yes.
exist in the cardiovascular or more that a longer time domain. And if they were just a weightlifter, they might undereat, ironically. So yeah, they don't like, even the really good ones out there, they don't even pick up if you're doing a set of 5 back squats, right? But I walk up a flight of stairs and it's, are you okay? And I'm like, calm down. Like, stop yelling at me. So I think they're tools to be used, but within the space of CrossFit, ironically, I think they're less useful than most other training methodologies that are out there. And yet people become very emotionally attached to them.
Oh,
Stress if you ask them to remove them. So
yeah, that if I could pick one thing that people to never look at on their wearable again would be the calories burned. I
yeah,
just
oh my God,
I
right?
just don't, like you said, it's so intricated to calories in, calories
Yep.
out, what you're doing.
Yep.
Your watch is just it's just looking at movement patterns and it's based it off of charts and it's trying to estimate where you're
Yep.
at.
Exactly.
But like we just talked about, there's so much variability in that. So if
Yep.
I'm sitting here and I'm like tapping my leg the whole time,
Right.
my watch isn't picking that up. It doesn't know I'm tapping my leg. So there's just a lot of inaccuracies. Just that's just the way the system currently is.
Agreed. Completely agreed. Yeah, for sure.
Do you find sometimes that it can be detrimental because some athletes really like certain numbers as like their teddy bear and their thing, but you also know as a coach, it might be the thing that's holding them
Oh
back
yeah.
at the same time.
I definitely. So not to pick on Whoop, but the strain
Oh, I pick on
calculator
them all the
comes
time.
out
They don't like me.
the strain calculator that comes out of Whoop, like the worst thing that ever happened
Oh, it's so
to
stupid.
performance-based athletes because it's really biased towards cardiovascular dominated workouts, so endurance
Yeah,
style training,
because it
right?
was easier to calculate.
Yes, substantially, right?
Yeah.
So I have these athletes that won't eat unless they hit like a certain strain score, right? And
Oh
I'm
no.
it's like, what are you doing? Right? Like the watch didn't work out as much today. I'm like, the watch is wrong. Like it's just wrong. Like I can prove it to you, but you don't have the attention span to listen to me. So, but like seriously, so yeah, I hate some of those metrics that come out there. The calorie output for sure, the strain, all of those things are problematic. This is deviating a little bit, but I won't let my athletes, as long as they're listening to me, wear them during competitions because
Oh
like
God,
when
no.
what happens is like you're into a comp, right? Like your sympathetic nervous system goes into hyperdrive. Your HRV and your RHR are gonna like head in the wrong direction from where we want them to be. And now you wake up on the day of a competition and you're like your little watch is telling you that you're in the red and you're not primed to perform. Well, how do you respond to that as an athlete? The vast majority of us are going to listen to it and at least on some subconscious level and have it impact our performance. And so I really think that athletes should be taking those things off the week before, bare minimum, to avoid all of that nonsense that's going to come as you move into a higher stress competition.
Yeah, that's the same thing I tell people because I get lots of, we'll say, interesting emails about heart rate variability and about, oh, but if it's red and what if it's a competition? I'm like, well, one, if I'm using it, I should have prepared the athlete for this ahead of time,
Yeah.
right? And I'll
Yeah.
even have some athletes like if their HRV average is good
Yep.
and an acute day their score is bad, like I may have them
Yeah.
go train and do some low volume, high
Yep.
intensity stuff. Hey,
Totally.
look, you hit a PR. Great.
Yep.
We're not going to do that every day, but
No,
just
I
because
agree.
your score is bad, it's not always bad for performance. And
No, I
then
completely agree.
one of the best quotes I ever heard on this was from Rich Froning. He's in training, you should listen to your body. In competition, I tell my body to shut up.
Yeah,
I was like,
100%.
that's so perfect.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Exactly. I completely agree. Yeah, HRV I think is a really interesting metric, more about it than I do. But in general, when athletes do ask me about it, my general response is I try to ignore single day data for any lack of better usage and mostly focus on larger trends, right? For women with an active cycle, we're going to have some data there that's going to consistently every month cause problems on an HRV score. But if your training has been harder, and your coach has already pre-programmed this in and your HRV is dipping, that's not problematic necessarily. It may just be the stimulus that we're looking for as you move into a deload period to get the compensation effect that we're after in the
Yep.
first place, right? So yeah, but people tend to look at those data and say, oh, I can't train today or I shouldn't train today. And it's, well, no, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah. And that's what's, at least with HRV is the bane of my existence because it's not, and then people want to blame the device. And there are some devices that do HRV absolutely horribly. So there is some
Totally.
definite truth to that. But even if you get an accurate measurement, my little air quotes golden rule is that
Sure.
if you get an HRV measurement and it is accurate, it is only telling you the status of your autonomic nervous system at the time of measurement.
Right.
That's all I was telling you. The little guy doesn't pop up out of your phone and put shackles on you and tell you can't train today.
Completely.
If you did it at a different time, you were dehydrated, whatever.
Yep.
But if athletes can just remember that and put it into context, they're, they're usually okay. But
Yes.
again, some coaches have done help with that. Some have said don't wear it at all. And then you might get some of these athletes too. I get the ones that are just completely burnt out because
Oh yeah.
they could drive themselves so hard and there was nothing to pull them back. And
Yeah.
so they end up on my doorstep and they're going, I don't know why I'm so fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's become, there's obviously been an issue for a long time, but I saw it interestingly during the qualification and at the CrossFit Games last year with
Mm,
not necessarily like some of my athletes, but other people that I've worked with in the past or just casually as a fan watch where it's interesting. You hear the term, I just couldn't find that fifth gear, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Well, that I know what's happened, right? And they may have a great coach that has programmed for other athletes very successfully because they have a very high communication relationship. And that athlete comes to them and says, yo, I feel like shit. I haven't slept well for a week. My sex hormones are in the trash based upon my drive and everything. And the coach is like, all right, great. Like, let's deload now as opposed to 10 days from now, and let's make some adjustments. And you have other athletes who are just, to use some of Brett Bartholomew's work, they're like that soldier, right? If you tell them
Mm.
what to do, they're gonna do it. You say hit 100% effort on the assault bike for 12 sets of whatever, they're going to do it even if it puts them into the hospital, right?
Yeah.
And that's not probably what that coach wants. That coach wants some level of feedback and adjustment to prevent that from happening. But that's where the art, to, like his book's title, that's where the
Yeah.
art of coaching comes into play, right? Of how do you communicate to your athletes as a nutrition coach or a programmer what you're really looking for and making sure that they get that message such that they can go out and perform at the highest level when they need to.
Yeah. And that's where with the higher end athletes, that's primarily what I like about HRV is I can show them a metric and be like, hey, Bob, your HRV has been in the, it's like going off the cliff
Right.
because at some level they almost like the little soldier athlete, they feel bad that they couldn't get the level of performance and that they couldn't hold up. It's no, you were in the red for 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you need to hold back. It's not
Yes.
a nothing against you personally. You're not a bad
Nope.
human being. You didn't do anything wrong. But at least if I could show them data of saying, this is from your physiology is telling us that
Yes.
you are almost at max. And then they're, oh, okay, so I'm not just a big pussy. It's no, you're not
Oh,
just
no, 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 no,
this
no,
is
no.
your system.
Yeah.
And then once they get through a few of those cycles, they're
Yes.
I get oh yeah, okay, cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally. For sure. I think it's interesting. I don't know. I often try to help connect it to like mental health. And that's not a world where there's a shitload of data or anything, but so much of it is like I feel more emotional like an athlete, a lot of athletes, especially on the female side of things, but I'm crying at my workouts and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is a sign.
Yep.
Right? Like this is the connection between your physical health and your emotional and your mental health. And we need to take all of this into consideration and be smart about your training and things like that. And so some of it is these hard data, some of it is just listening and helping an athlete understand like what some of those cues are, right? And having all of these tools in your toolbox to educate them. Some athletes are really hyper intelligent, and I can go and show them what was it, that cell metabolism paper where they gave people absolutely stupid levels of high intensity interval training that they had no business doing. And sure enough, like their mitochondrial function went to garbage and their performance tanked and then it came back a week later after deload and crushed it. And other athletes, if I try to explain that to them, like they're in la la land, they're not paying attention, but I
Yeah.
can say, hey, if you feel more emotional in your training, that's a sign that we probably need to go talk to coach about this. And so having all of these tools in the toolbox, I think, is ultimately what we need to, because there's so many different athletes out there.
Yeah, that's some of Andrew Fry's old work from the
Mhm.
90s showing where he had, I think, Olympic weightlifters go in and do
Yeah.
like multiple 1RMs for 2 weeks in a row. And like he didn't really show, they didn't look at HRV as far as I know, but they didn't see a huge change in metrics. But like you said, mood and then
Yep.
performance, like I think
Mhm.
mood dysregulation was like one of the first thing that came up. Willingness to train. It's man, I just don't want to train today at all. And then performance has fallen off because of speed and power and yeah, but
Yes.
having athletes know that I think is useful. And that's again, that's the art of coaching, building up trust with them to say, hey,
For
again, you're
sure.
not a bad person. This thing's happened. Hey, maybe I'll even take the blame. Maybe I pushed it a little bit too hard, maybe restricted
Yeah.
your calories a little bit too much. I
Yeah.
apologize, but we're gonna fix it because we went
Yeah.
this direction, that direction didn't work. So now I know this other direction is gonna be better. And
Yeah.
it's just a it's a process.
I love with athletes the idea of like radical accountability as like a coach, right? If they're going, shit, it's my fault. When things go well, it's your win. So that's a great strategy. I love that for sure.
So how do you build up that trust? Because especially, and I don't want to pin this all on female athletes because I've had male athletes do the
Sure.
exact same thing. Telling them like, hey, you need to eat more carbohydrates.
Yeah,
For a lot of them is freaky, especially when body compositions, relative strength to power, all that stuff is a thing of their sport.
totally, totally, for sure. It's hard. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's obviously easy if you have like that Christina Ramos story I told you earlier, where it's like, oh, we ate more and we got leaner, stronger, fitter, slept better, and had better mood. Like,
Yeah.
cool, feed me, right? It's harder going all the way back to my very first high profile athlete, somebody like Tasia Persevich, who, as we ate more, did not necessarily lean out, just
Right.
built like insanely large muscles that on some level made her feel really uncomfortable, right? Her arms were freaking huge. And it wasn't due to anything other than her genetics and the fact that she was training 4 to 5 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
When we were fueling her appropriately. So that's a harder one to sell. And it takes time. It's a lot of repetitive conversations. It's a lot of, for me, asking questions around what are goals? Like, why are you doing this? What do you want out of this year? What do you want out of the season? If you were to go back, or if you were to tell somebody else what they should be focusing on, what would that look like? The things that are, what is it, very just much about like self-appreciation for what you do have, right? Can you find three things that you love about yourself, right? Although I have had that backfire. I will not use their name,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I literally had somebody who is, we'll say, amongst the fittest people on the planet when I worked with them, unable to tell me three things that they loved about.
Oh.
I literally couldn't find them. And
Mm.
that's first off heartbreaking.
Yeah, yeah.
As a coach, you're trying to bring positivity to a situation, and unfortunately backfires on you. So you got to be, I had to be better in that situation, recognize that maybe that wasn't the best question to ask that person. Those are the types of approaches. And then just a lot of listening. Early in my career, when people didn't necessarily know who I was from a nutrition coach in the CrossFit space perspective, I checked in on my athletes like all the time, right? Like I was an open phone, for lack of a better word for it, of communication. They could message me anytime. I would message them 3, 4, 5 times a week, just seeing how they were doing, listening to them, and not necessarily always trying to solve the problem. Sometimes just saying, "Hey, that sucks. That's really hard." I think it's a stereotypical male female thing where men try to solve problems, women want to just be heard.
Yeah.
I definitely am falling that other camp sometimes, especially with my kids, where I'm like, I just want somebody to tell me that it's hard and not try to fix it. So it's not male female, but it's stereotyped that way. But yeah, a lot of times it's just being like, hey, you know what? It does suck that the fact that even though you've dialed in your sleep and you're eating really well and your training's going well, that you're not generating the same physique as whoever. I get it. That's hard. I'm sorry. And not trying to solve that. That's all they want to hear.
Yeah, and that's a skill that took me, oh God, too long to learn. One, I learned it primarily from my wife because she would beat me over the head with big signs and be like, I don't want you to solve it.
Yeah.
I just want you to listen. And I'm
Yep.
like, as a stereotypical male
Yep.
engineer, I'm like, but must solve problem. I get paid to solve problems. Must solve problem.
Right.
No.
Right.
And also my friend Dr. Lisa Lewis was telling me that too on the psychology side is it's not necessarily your job as a coach to always take away their pain. That might be a motivator or a thing for them to change and do something different. And
Mhm.
plus, you didn't really cause it. It's not your responsibility. By all means, listen. By all means, try to be useful, be helpful, that type of thing. But
Right.
I know where early on, I would hear someone have a difficult circumstance, and I felt obligated that I should solve it and remove that from them, which is not the best idea.
No, sometimes it's just I don't know if it's sympathy or empathy, but that's really just what they need in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do in the cases where, like you said, it's hard because there is so much variability. Like I've worked with a fair amount of female athletes where, yeah, we did
Mhm.
get eating 300 grams more carbohydrates and they ate more calories. They felt better. Their energy
Yeah.
availability went up. They actually got leaner because they're doing more work.
Sure.
They're doing more high quality work. Their sleep went up. But like you said, I've also had other athletes where it didn't necessarily happen
Yeah.
either. And it's so
Yeah.
I was talking to my buddy Ben House about this a while ago. It's the longer I think you work with people, the more appreciation you have for just the massive variability from one person to the
Totally.
next. And especially when you start working with high-end athletes and outliers and freaks, like
Yes.
how far away they are from the actual norm,
Sure.
it's mind-blowing. So therefore,
Yeah.
your ability to predict stuff, I think, just goes in the shitter.
Yeah, completely agreed. Yeah, I think in those situations where things don't necessarily go the way that we expect, honestly, from the start, maybe this is just a me thing, but my baseline expectation while I'm giving somebody something is that they're not going to go the way I expect, and then I'm happily
Yeah.
pleased when they do. Maybe you're the same way, but it's always like when somebody's like, eating more and I'm eating out, and I'm like, oh, that's amazing, great.
Yeah.
I was going to prepare for the alternative in the back of my mind, plan for the worst, hope for the best. In those situations, I think first is just literally like trying to literally make sure that things are being done the way that we want them to, right? So are we accurately tracking how much guesstimating is going on? Trying to create a safe place of, listen, I'm not ever going to be mad at you if these things are not being done. You'd like just tell me openly and honestly, because if you say this is a 10 out of 10 importance goal for you, but your actions indicate it's like a 6 or a 7, then I can help you, right? I can help you, or I can go get a mental performance specialist that will, right? But if you never tell me these things, then it's hard for me to fix them. So first is just trying to create that safe space of, this is a judgment-free zone. I don't care if you told me that you didn't eat it all this weekend, or you went out and ate 4 pizzas this weekend. I will have zero emotional response to it. So that's step one. Let's say all of those things are still going in the right direction. I will often look to see if there is some sort of weird physiological issue that I'm missing. I'm not big on running tons of tests, but let's make sure that you don't have, some sort of weird hypothyroidism or something like that going on. Let's just
Even
make
just
sure
simple
there's
low
no,
iron.
yeah, right?
High
Low
iron
iron,
with the guys. Yeah.
hypothyroidism, PCOS, right? Let's be clear, with the high androgen increases that we see with PCOS in a sport like CrossFit, it wouldn't be necessarily surprising to see a strong demographic overlap of women that have that. And there's this, again, they're not going to be the overweight PCOS individual, but there's aspects of that that we can think about. I'm not going to all of a sudden do something to someone who has PCOS and make them go into 12% Tiatumi land of performance and aesthetics. That's not what's going to happen. But maybe we can move the needle a little bit. Those are really my first steps. And then, like we said, to some extent, it's having that individual understand that despite what you might think based upon social media, and yes, at the highest level of the sport now in 2024, those athletes are going to both be, they're going to have an amount of food that allows for max performance and elite level of aesthetics for most of them, right? Not all of them. I would say there's a couple athletes at the highest level in the sport that are not the most aesthetically whatever. Whereas 5 years ago, or even just maybe going from like that 0.01% to the 1% level, where there's just as many athletes that are super freaking fit that don't have 18 abs or quads that hang over their knees, right? Like, and you're just aware of all of the other ones due to the fact of that's how social media and marketing works, right? Like those individuals are put onto your radar much more so than they would have been in the absence of those sponsorships and things. It's like I like to use a demographic or an image where I show like, hey, this is the amount of food that you need to eat for elite performance. This is the amount of food that you need to eat for elite aesthetics. And there are these individuals that sit right here in the middle that somehow get to do both. And it's completely out of my ability to control if you're one of those people or not, for the most part.
No, totally. Because you're at I think, again, it's hard for even high level athletes to
Yeah,
appreciate how freaky some of the freaks actually are.
totally.
And and a lot of times it's not anything I've done. I haven't done anything magical. There's nothing crazy. It's just, wow, that individual just, for whatever reason, I was talking to my buddy Cal Dietz about this the other day. There are just some individuals, he's talking about one of his top female athletes, and I've never really coached her. I watch her to get coaching ideas of how to coach these other athletes because she is
Yeah,
that phenomenal. And I get tons of ideas to help other athletes, but I actually stopped coaching her because for whatever reason, 99% of the time she's doing it correct. And if she's
yeah,
doing something different, I at least now have learned, okay, why is she doing that? And let's measure it. Oh, it is better. Okay, so,
right.
but if
Yeah,
you were to ask her, she doesn't even know what she's doing. She's
agree.
just able
Yeah,
to
they're just
do
able to do
it.
it, right? Yeah, it's a great example. So if I were to take my top athletes, right? So I've worked with Emma Lawson since she was like 15 years old, right? And yes, 100% she's eating more as a result of working with me, not because of me. If she'd gone to some other someone else, they would have said the same thing and she'd be eating more, right? But if I were to take that same 4,000 calorie diet and give it to another individual who literally could be training with Emma and follow her around all day, we're not going to produce the same result, right?
Right.
Not aesthetically, not recovery, not body comp, like weight gain or lack thereof. It's not going to happen, right? It's so am I responsible for that, or did I just happen to give the best plan for that time for that individual? And it's really a small piece of their overall just genetic and I don't know, I know it's epidemiological, but their social settings and everything
Sure.
else is really driving the success. Like I can tell you, I've given similar plans to other athletes, and they haven't had second place CrossFit Games finishes.
Yeah.
Never mind even like qualified for semifinals. There's just some aspect of it of at this point with how far these sports have progressed, where it's out of our ability to control. So,
Yeah, and that's how I even phrase it to athletes too. It's okay, we're gonna do everything we can
yep,
to put you in the best position you
yep,
can and talk to other coaches. If something's not working, we'll keep trying to figure stuff out. And wherever you end up is wherever you end up, right? And it's a weird thing to be responsible in air quotes for their output and yet not,
yeah,
right? Because that even like with body comp changes, I made the same argument with other people that no matter the example I use all the time is Oprah. Like
yep,
Oprah has a very public weight's been up, weight's been down. She's a very public figure. It's easy to see. She's been in the spotlight for decades. And in theory, she could hire a personal trainer. She could
sure,
hire a chef. She could hire anyone she wants, but she still has to do the work. She
yep,
still has to put in the reps. She still
yep,
has to eat the food. So even at the highest level of trying to outsource stuff, there's things you just can't outsource, right? And
completely.
at some point, with athletes, you can do everything you can to the best of your ability, their other coach's ability, and at that point, whatever
Yeah,
their output is what their output is.
yeah, I think that's a great perspective. Like flipping it away from performance perspective, thinking about aesthetics, where you could take two athletes. I've taken two athletes where we want to produce a leaner physique and we put them into caloric deficits. And one will lose a female menstrual cycle and one doesn't. And it's what are you supposed to do in that situation, right? There are clear detriments to the lack of those hormones. But why does one person have this tiny, minuscule room for error where yeah, they can lose weight, but they're going to have consequences as a result of it. Other one, I can like slash and all I want, and their body's like perfectly happy and fine to live in this calorie deficit state. Am I doing anything differently for either of those two individuals? No. Are they doing anything differently? I will say a macro level, no pun intended. No. It's just their scenario, right? Yeah, they could maybe try to manage stress or who knows, maybe there's some aspect from previous parts of their life of trauma that's involved. I don't know, but we're not going to change those things. Not you and me. No offense to either
Yeah,
of us.
yeah. No, totally. Yeah. You look at the data on like the from the heritage trial, like the heritability of VO2 max,
Yep.
it's massive. It's potentially 50 to 80%, depending on what you read, who you believe, whatever.
Huge.
But it's also there's sub studies looking at that of how genetics determine how you're responding to training. And
Mm-hmm.
my interpretation, I don't know if you would agree, is that up until a certain point, like almost everyone is extremely trainable. Most
Yes.
people, in my opinion, should hit 50s, maybe even mid 50s, VO2 max. Some people, that's going to take you years of effort to get
Years.
there, maybe longer. Completely doable.
Totally.
To hit 70,
Yeah.
I don't think I could, even if I wanted to be an endurance athlete and started training them in 20, I don't think my VO2 max
Oh,
would ever hit 70. I think there's just
oh.
some things that are fixed. But then again, you look at elite level athletes, there's people who have won major endurance competitions with a
Mhm.
VO2 max less than 72.
Right.
So it's also
Totally.
not the be all end all of everything either.
Completely. Yeah, I don't know exactly where the research is going to go on this. So I have a background in gut biology and things like that. I read
Hmm.
studies about the in the presence of certain bacteria that process lactate and generate short chain fatty acids. Is
Right.
it? And it's probably not. It's probably not. It's cool and it gets me all, jazzed up and things of that nature. But there's just so many variables that we probably still haven't even considered outside of genetics, epigenetics, and things of that nature that are at play. And again, how many of those are we going to actually be able to control? Probably fewer than we want, especially when working with people that are trying to be the best in the world at something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one last question to wrap up here. On a practical side, how do you get someone to eat 500 grams of carbohydrates a day? And at what point do you toss nutrient density out the window almost? Because I remember, I won't say the athlete's name because I don't have his permission, but years ago,
Yep.
working with a high-level athlete, he was training 3 sessions a day, probably 2 sessions a day was an easy day, high-level competitor. And I posted a picture in the evening of him eating 2 donuts.
Yeah.
Put it on the internet, didn't think anything of it. Oh my God, the amount of backlash I got from
Yeah.
that was
Sure. For sure.
insane.
Yeah.
And I'm like trying to
People
explain
get
to him,
mad.
like, this dude's eating 3,600 calories of paleo as fuck nutrition during
Yeah.
the day. And if he doesn't hit at least 4,500 calories, like his training drops. And he likes donuts. So we have him eat a couple donuts at the end of
Yeah.
the day. But it was like mind blowing to,
People get really mad when aesthetically pleasing individuals eat foods that they
yes.
struggle to work into their diet. It's, yeah, I don't know. It's not super surprising to me, but yeah, it's anyways. So how do I deal with it? So, for me at baseline, as I work with athletes, I have this expanding box model where let's just take somebody who's only training an hour only, who's training an hour a day. That person can probably meet all of their caloric needs with 85% micronutrient dense foods and 15% fun stuff to keep it sustainable and make life enjoyable. As we start to move to 2 hours of training, then we really want to work in some more easy to digest, but not hyper palatable carbohydrates. So a lot of rice, oatmeals. I have no problem with bread at this point in my life. Dried fruits, calorically dense, things of that nature. When we start to get to 3 to 4 hours of training, then I would argue that we need the hyper palatable type of foods to surpass our natural satiety cues when we're training 4 hours a day. The act of training 4 hours a day is going to suppress your appetite. And I see this manifested with clients where their rest day comes and they're ravenous, right?
oh,
Because
yeah. Yeah.
finally done training, their parasympathetic nervous system kicks on. They've probably unintentionally been in a deficit for the last 3 days of training. And so they're super hungry. And so, ironically, a lot of my athletes will eat more food on their rest days when there's more time to eat and their body is better at digestion. So, that's at that point, I am often suggesting carbohydrate powders and things of that nature to help get them into those, at that point, probably like 400, 450 range of carbs. Once we go beyond that, if we're into like 5 to 6 hours a day of training, really at that point, well, let me back up for a second. With a 4 hour training athlete, I still want them working in micronutrient dense foods away from their training blocks. So we finish training at 4 o'clock. By dinner time, yeah, you can absolutely handle salad, fruits, veggies, all that stuff. Once we get to 5 to 6 hours of training a day, like I am intentionally pulling those things out of their daily diet and moving them to recovery and rest days. Because again, like they're not going to train that volume all year long, or at least they
Yeah.
shouldn't be, right?
I don't, yeah.
These are like set blocks leading into competitions where you're peaking. So the rest of the year, they're eating micronutrient-dense foods. They're not going to become depleted for the most part in a short time period of less consumption of these foods. And here's why. Reason one is just simple density, right? To get 600, 700, 800 grams of carbs in per day, even a sweet potato is going to become problematic. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
yeah.
Never mind
The amount of
broccoli
sweet
or
potatoes you need to do that, dude, it's crazy.
oh yeah, but even a couple of them, right? They just sit there and they take way longer to digest than a bagel does. Mal O'Brien, I worked with her for a while. And as she was leading into her second place finish a year at the games, 3+ bagels a day, right? Just she loved them. They were easy to eat, hyper palatable, super dense source of calories. Awesome, crush them. The other reason beyond just caloric density that we need is there are some athletes that I've found where the consumption of like specifically cruciferous vegetables underneath a high volume and high intensity of training was causing gastrointestinal issues.
Oh, yeah.
This goes back to the sympathetic, activation of the nervous system. That's a huge connection to the gut via the vagal nerve. Basically, what happens is it gets this thing that's going to require like what forever essentially to digest. The body is in a fight or flight state. It's not really interested in digesting it, and so it just pushes the evac button, floods a bunch of water into their intestine, and they get diarrhea, right? And so, how many athletes I don't know, maybe a couple dozen where I've been like, eat less vegetables. And sure enough, all of their GI issues go away. And so it's again, that's an individual perspective or individual specific thing, but it's just one more reason for me to say, look, I'm not anti-vegetables. I'm not going to be some carnivore diet Looney Tune over here. But if your goal is elite performance and we're training with crazy high volume, quality is not the priority. It's not. We can hit those needs on your day when you do a 1 hour swim and then sit on your butt. We can hit that on your rest day and put a ton of quality in that and those days. And then when we're in our off season, yeah, you better be eating a high quality diet to build up your micronutrient reservoirs for when we have to go into these phases. So that's generally how I approach it.
Yeah, and I think also, like you said, emphasizing to the athlete and the general public that being an elite level competitor in anything is not super healthy.
No.
There's a point where exercise is beneficial, well, 1000%.
Yeah,
But if you're playing in the NFL and you're going to run full speed into
I
another
love it.
human being for 18, 17 weeks in a row, or you're a
Right.
top CrossFit athlete and do high output, crazy ass exercise for 3 days in a row,
Yes.
that's not healthy. And that's
But
fine.
we're not chasing health.
That's
And I
not the
think that's
point.
no, it's not the point. And I think sometimes it's hard for athletes to hear that because they're like, oh, fitness equals health. And I'm like, no, not even remotely true, right? In the case of the NFL, like you're sacrificing your health for cool experiences and millions of dollars, right? In
Hmm.
the case of CrossFit, we don't really have the millions of dollars thing, but there's, I don't know, some addictive benefit that people seem to get from it. And so we're chasing not health. We're chasing, you've gone beyond that spectrum of health. We're pushing to the point where the more you do, the less healthy you feel even if your fitness level is crazy. I give a couple of lectures a year at the Power Monkey Fitness camps down in Tennessee.
Nice.
And there's always elite athletes down there that they bring in. And I always ask them, I'm like, hey, at the games last year, when you were going into that, how healthy do you feel? And they're all like, bro, no, I don't feel healthy at all. I can talk to Alex Gazan about that, all of them. And yeah, no, they're not healthy at that point. They're just freakishly fit, freakishly fit. So I think it's an important thing for most people to recognize is that like you can post a couple pictures of your donut when you're training that volume and you need caloric density. And there's nothing wrong with it because it is absolutely in alignment with their goals. But just because they're doing it doesn't mean that I'm recommending you do it. I'll sit down and eat 3 donuts with anybody any day of the week, but I'm not saying it's a good idea for your aesthetic or health-based goals. you
Oh,
know?
totally. And sometimes after my clients, I'm like, you're not exercising 3 hours a day.
No.
And if you got to the point where you were doing 3 hours of exercise a day, I guarantee you're not doing it at that level. You're not doing it that power output. You're not moving those
No.
kind of loads.
Right.
You're just not, and that's okay. You're not a bad human being. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just
Completely.
you can't then feel bad that you're not able to do that also because
Yeah.
you're just not at that output.
Yeah.
That's just the reality.
Yeah, that's another hard thing, right? So you take these athletes that have been training since they're 10 years old, and you're like, why do they eat more than me? We're training the same amount. I'm like, well, they have a higher fitness level than you. Like, what are your watts when you're on the assault bike or the biker? They'll tell me, and I'm like, yeah, that's 65% of what they're doing while
Yeah.
still hanging in zone two, right? And I can't hold those paces. And so it's just, and it's casual for them. I'll never forget when I was working out at this gym up in New Hampshire when we were still living up in the Dartmouth area, this elite team guy came in from Europe and he was there for 4 months. And we were doing an assault bike workout and he was like casually holding like a 1200 calorie an hour pace
Oh,
while,
Jesus.
while talking to me, right, about what he was doing, right? And it's just I'm over there just getting crushed at I don't know 960 or something. And it's just a different physiology. Like their output is just radically different. Never mind how they train, right? Ironically, like if you go into the gym and do 2 hours of CrossFit, like that's not what Emma Lawson does. That's not
No.
what Noah and those guys are doing. They're doing a lot of strength work and then they're going really long, like 60, 90 minutes, multiple times per week. And they're building that big aerobic base that most of us just don't have. So like their caloric outputs are different as a result of that training as well.
Yeah. And that's why I like using the bike or especially the rower because it clearly identifies, like you said, their output, right?
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, if you can get on the concept too and show me you can at least go sub
Yeah.
7 2K, much
Yep.
less get to 6.5 minutes, 6:20,
Right.
6:15. And I think for people who haven't done some of that, they're like, Oh, well, if I hit 7, 6:30 shouldn't be that hard. I'm like,
No.
7 and 6:30 might as well be two different freaking universes for most
Yeah,
people,
you're
you know?
multiple years away from that goal. Unless you're a freak and have never trained before, you're a couple of years away from that for sure. I actually
Yeah.
like those pieces of equipment as well because on the flip
Oh,
side,
they're
sometimes
great.
we justify why somebody needs to eat as much food as they are. So let's say somebody starts to get into that competitive world and now they are trying to build that aerobic base. And they're like, yeah, I did an hour of zone two work, but like I was barely sweating the entire time. And I'm like, okay, let's just do some math. If you were on that bike for 45 minutes, were you holding a 750 calorie pace per hour? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. So that one training session alone burned 550-ish calories for you. And then you went and did 3 hours more of work that day, right? So you've got a basal metabolic rate of 1,500 calories. We can already add, we'll say 550, being hyper conservative to that number before you did anything else the rest of that day, not taking into account thermic effect of food or what you did when you weren't training. I think we need to eat more food. So sometimes that actually, on the flip side, it can be beneficial from a coaching perspective of helping somebody understand that they do need to eat more food.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you so much for all your time here. I really appreciate it. Where
Thank you for having
can
me.
people find out more about you? I know you've got a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, so just our Instagram account is probably the best place to get information about what we do and our philosophy. So at m2performancenutrition.com, we have some very low cost of entry educational content for just monthly digests and things if you really want to dive deeper into this stuff. But you got the pro on the screen with me there already, so you're covered on that front. But yeah, come check us out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your time and especially all the work you've done over the years and especially for just so freely sharing all your knowledge too. Because after you've been doing it for a long time, it's one thing to know what to do, but it's a whole nother thing to make all the pieces work together. So, but thank you for
Totally.
all that.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. A huge thanks to Dr. Mike for doing this interview. Really appreciate it. This was such a fun conversation. And like I said in the intro, I love that he was able to not only has the background of doing this for many years, able to use specific case studies so that you can follow these athletes and look and see what they're doing. A lot of times I think there's some misconceptions that, oh wow, they're performing well and they're very lean, so they must be on a low carbohydrate diet. And as you realize by listening to this interview, that is not the case. Again, there's a time and a place for using a potentially lower carbohydrate approach or even a ketogenic diet. But if your goal is high level output, especially through a sport that's extremely glycolytic like CrossFit, that's not gonna go very well. So huge thanks to him. Make sure you check out all of his stuff. He's got really great stuff, awesome information. As we mentioned in the intro, this is an excerpt from the Flex Diet certification under the carbohydrate section. I'm always updating and changing things, reviewing the literature, going back to the certification again to see if there's changes and tweaks that we need to make. That's actually why we host it on a specific site that is a learning environment so that when you get one login, you will have all the information. Whenever you go to that login, it is already updated. There's no need to look for multiple emails or updates. Once in a while, I will send you an email update of things that are new, but you can just go into one location and know that it is the most current and updated form as it is there. So always making tweaks, making sure everything that I said even a couple of years ago is still valid. If you're interested in it, the Flex Diet Cert opens again in June 2024. We'll have a link to the wait list. You can go below. Also put you on the daily newsletter. We have lots more free information delivered right to your inbox. And if you're looking for a great electrolyte supplement, check out Element. Go to drinklmnt.com/Mike Nelson. We'll have a link below. By far and away my favorite electrolyte supplement. I'm using a fair amount of it now in South Padre, Texas here, where it is quite a bit warmer than Minnesota, although Minnesota was record heat the other day. So check that out below. Huge thanks for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate it. If you have time, hit the and subscribe button or download it. It goes a long way to help us with the old algorithms for better distribution, which then allows us to get different guests onto the podcast much easier. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. and we will talk to all of you next week.
That was wonderful.
Bravo!
I loved that.
Oh, it was great.
Well, it was pretty good.
Well, it wasn't bad.
Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good,
It
though.
could have been a lot better.
I didn't really like it.
It was pretty terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful.
It was
Get
terrible.
him away!
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.